The door's closing, so we're starting, I think. So that means I'm going to intro myself, make sure my timers are working, which gives everyone a chance to come in and sit down in front in a nice seat and get ready. Alrighty, hello, my name is Alan Richardson. I am an independent consultant. You can find me at EvilTester.com. And this is, I've made an assumption that people here are kind of test managers or test leads, and we're looking at Agile projects, DevOps projects, and sometimes we look at the real world and we see people talking about these things and it's unclear how our roles fit in. And I just want to give you a quick survival guide. Now, if anyone is interested in Agile in general, I have a leaflet which folds out into a poster, look at that, free poster, that you can put on your wall with some questions about Agile answered. Anyone that wants one of those can ask later on. So, there we go. This is how to survive, because a lot of the time what we're dealing with is we're dealing with adaptive processes and adaptive systems. And they are generally, in the real world, like survival, evolutionary, how people survive in these things, which is why I use those words. And I'm aiming it at test managers, because is anyone here doing an Agile project? Okay, is anyone doing a DevOps project? Is anyone doing an Agile and a DevOps project? Are people doing DevOps because Agile didn't work? Has everyone got Agile working? People still doing waterfall? Okay, so I wasn't really paying any attention. Right, but what we're dealing with Agile and DevOps is, I don't think we have any formal definitions. I could be wrong. Right? There could be formal definitions out there. There might be well-defined definitions of what it means to be Agile. But I don't know what they are, because every time I see a project, they're working differently. I don't actually know what it means to be DevOps. I know what I think it means, but companies interpret that differently. I don't think it is approached in the same way in every company. Like, you'll wander around here and you'll go, hi, I'm Alan, hi, I'm Bob, we do Agile too, and it'll be high fives. But no one will really be doing the same Agile, right? Because Agile is different in every place. So we've got these words that we can agree on, but they're different. So I don't think people really agree on what they are, which is good for us in terms of where do test managers or test leads fit into this type of process. Because testing thrives when there's ambiguity. That's what testers are really good at. Testers are really good at spotting ambiguity. When there's ambiguity in requirements, we identify that and we test for that. When there's ambiguity in communication, when people don't really understand what's going on, when there's uncertainty, that's when testing is really good. And we have years of training in dealing with uncertainty, in ambiguity, in clarifying it, in asking questions. More so than potentially anyone else on the software development projects. Particularly in software, Agile software development really talks about software developers, by which they really mean programmers, and Scrum Masters and product owners. But the people that really deal with ambiguity are analysts and designers and testers, and they're not mentioned in that group of people. So there's a potential risk that we're not getting those skills in there. But as test managers and test leads, we can offer these type of skills. Now, when there's no definitions, that really means that everything is up for grabs. Right? We get to define it. If someone else doesn't have a definition, you can give them a definition. One of the things that I learned from psychotherapy is that when you're dealing with people and you're dealing with their belief systems, if you can wear those belief systems down to the point that the belief system is almost gone, and that belief system goes away, and you don't have anything ready to fill that gap gets filled in with all their anxieties and worries and concerns. And so the reason you give people something new to believe in is to give them a strong point from which to work from. So everything is up for grabs in the terms of Agile. Now, when you look at the Agile literature, what we very often see are books and articles talking about the team as a system. Now, when I'm talking about software development now, I'm talking about a system of development, the way that we develop things. Not necessarily the process, because the process is something that other people do. The system is something that we are part of. And when we talk about a system of development, that is everyone working together. Very often Agile talks about the team as a system, how the team work together, how the product owner works with the developers, how we work through that sprint, what we do in there in terms of the communication processes, how we communicate, how we work. But unfortunately in the real world, or fortunately in the real world for everyone, it's not just the team in isolation. The team sits inside a department which is working on multiple projects, with multiple teams, with political stuff on the top, with multiple change management processes going on at the same time. The real world is a messy place. And very often when we look at the Agile descriptions, management is not mentioned in there. Right? Scrum Masters are not management. They are Scrum Masters. They are helping the team succeed. Very often Scrum Masters are ex-project managers, so they find it hard to fit into that role because they're used to managing, and being a Scrum Master is very different. So we've got this team as a system that is very collaborative, and it doesn't really mention test management. It doesn't really mention test leads. So very often when we look at this in literature, people get confused and they don't know where they fit in. But we also get confused because we've confused quality assurance and testing. When we talk about QA instead of testing, we talk about QAs instead of testers. It seems to be a very American thing, I'm not sure why, but it's come over into Agile, it's come over into how we operate in this world. But QA is not testing, and we get told quality is owned by the team, which is true, but if quality is owned by a team and we have QAs, then surely the QAs are really owning the quality on behalf of the team, and that's the testing, but we automate the testing, so we don't really have to worry about that, because we've got all the automated tests, so we're good, we've covered this. But we haven't really understood testing in there, we've kind of obscured it. If we don't really need testing, we've got quality assurance, we don't really need testers, we certainly don't need test management. So then people are in, what are we going to do? If my company moves to Agile, is my job going to be safe? What am I going to do? How am I going to add value? How is it going to work? Well, fortunately, everything's up for grabs because people don't understand Agile. People don't know what they're doing in Agile. People don't understand testing in the first place, so you can tell them what testing actually means. You can tell them what testing actually means in Agile to define your role in there, because presumably, as a test manager, you have experience. And very often teams lack experience. You can provide some of that if you can communicate in the right way, because they need the right types of experience. What they don't need is experience of massive processes and massive documents and massive lead times. What they do need is experience in understanding risk, how to identify risk, how to determine whether we're going to mitigate or accept risk, how we're going to track risk over time, how we're going to collaborate in terms of communication, how to have a thick skin sometimes, which is what test managers are often very good at. By the way, if you want stickers, see me afterwards for some free stickers. This is the first of 4 stickers that I might remember to show you through this. And badges. I've got badges. If you want badges, I've got stuff to give away. Or stickers. Or leaflets on Agile. Right. Everything is up for grabs. That's how it works. Right, we've got no formal definitions as far as I'm aware, which means what we have are idealized models of things. Right? People have heard all the good stuff about Agile. Before I got into Agile, I've heard lots of good stuff about it. I had an idealized model of Agile in my head. And that's not really what mapped onto the real world. We have to learn to work with the real world rather than idealized models. And what you'll find is we have competing models of Agile. So you've got Scrum, you've got Kanban, you've got different ways of doing things. You've got DevOps moving into that same space. And these are idealized models that are unclear. Now, fortunately, I've been kind of aware of this kind of stuff for a long time. Back in the 80s, I think, when I was younger, I would be reading the books from William S. Burroughs, and he mentioned Hassan-i Sabbah. Hassan-i Sabbah was mentioned in a book, Alamat, by Vladimir Bartol back in the 1930s, which I think is where William Burroughs found it. And Hassan-i Sabbah, set up the Assassins back in the turn of the first millennium, around about 1000, whatever. 1050, I think, is when he was born. So it's around about that time. And nowadays, kids are growing up with this notion, nothing is true, everything is permitted, which is a very subversive phrase, because they're exposed to it in the Assassin's Creed games. So I picked the London Assassin's Creed game because we're in here. But what this is basically, this is a creed to live by. Nothing is true, everything is subjective. We determine what our interpretation is going to be, and we communicate to that people, and we do what it takes, because everything is permitted based on the society we work with, so we see what works. If this is one of the underpinnings that you have when you work and operate with people. It gives you the chance to sell in your skills and experience to people, regardless of what their idealized model is, because you know that their idealized model is not true, it's what they think. You know that there is a reality underpinning that you have the experience to investigate. Because idealized models clash. Right? An idealized model of Agile is going to clash with an idealized model of test management. Particularly if your idealized model of test management is testers sitting separately from development teams, working on documentations, creating test cases and test scripts. These idealized models are not going to work. Fortunately, we work in the real world. We deal with systems of development. And within there, we have negotiable relationships, right? Because we have built up teams filled with individuals who have different skills and experiences. And they have to learn how to work with each other. So they have to make up their Agile process based on their skills and experience, and their Scrum Master helps them through that process. Because the Scrum Master, in theory, has experience of doing Agile. Now, the Scrum Master might only have experience of an idealized model of Scrum, which then doesn't help teams. But in theory, that's the aim. We're building a system of development. So when we take a systems view, this is what I encourage you to do. Regardless of whether you read books on systems theory, systems communication, psychotherapy of systems, systems in the organizational workplace, cybernetics, those are good things to read, but you don't have to in order to take a systems view, because we all know what a system is like, because we're testers, we work with systems all the time, we model them. What we want to look at is, how does an Agile or DevOps project actually work? What are people actually doing? What rituals are they actually following? What are the outcomes of those? Do they work? Do they cause us issues? What are the risks inherent in there? Testers are usually pretty good at spotting risks. And risks aren't just product risks. Risks aren't just business risks. Risks are how we interact. Where is the ambiguity in our communication? All of these things are risks. Where are the things that are actually going wrong? What issues are we experiencing? Are we ignoring those? When we have retrospectives, do we ignore the issues or do we actually act on them? Because issues come through. People are pretty good at recognizing issues, even if they're not good at recognizing risks. But then there's a risk if we don't actually act on the issues. Then it comes down to, because everything is a negotiable relationship with individuals, it's what can you do? So that means you have to be confident in your skills, in your experience, in your models of the world, what value you can add in order to communicate that to people. Because we have the issue that people don't understand how test management fits in, because test management hasn't been able to communicate how they fit in. We have the issue testers don't know how to fit in, because they haven't been able to communicate how they fit in, because they haven't recognized what value they bring and don't necessarily understand it. Now, from cybernetics, I've taken this amplification and attenuation of signals and noise. So amplification is the things that we stress and communicate and make louder, and attenuation are the things that we don't communicate, the things that we kind of hide away. And signals are things that we really want to pay attention to, and noise is the clutter that happens. I want my own Twitter client to filter out the noise so that I can just see the signals that come through in my feed, the things that only have links in it. If anyone's interested, you can go to chatterscan.com. Free Twitter client. But this amplification attenuation is a useful thing to keep in mind, because when we have daily stand-ups, what do people do? Are they amplifying signals, or are they just amplifying noise? What I did yesterday, what I'm going to do today. Is that a signal, or is that just noise? But maybe what's important is, this thing that I'm working on isn't going as well as we hoped. We've not really got the chance of fitting this in the next couple of days. We have these technical issues. We have attenuated away the signal because we're concentrating on the ritual, which is amplifying noise. And it's important to recognize that in terms of what is actually happening. Then we've also got the what do people expect you to do. Because that external facing communication, what your responsibilities are, gives you a way of recognizing your starting point in the process, your starting point in that system, what your entry is from which you can then develop. So we've got a couple of different types of models. The dynamic models in terms of how things work. Subjective models in terms of risks and issues, because nothing is true and it's what we believe in, it's what weight we put on the risks, it's how concerned we are about those issues. They are subjective. We have to understand the skills and experience that we have, that other people bring, because that is important, because we're tailoring the team, and if there are gaps in there, then there are risks that we can help identify. We have a communication model. Agile survives when the communication model works really well, which is why it stresses less upfront documentation, less writing down and agreeing things formally, because it's got a communication model that demands people communicate and stress things easily. But it's easy for that communication model to fail when people are just fulfilling roles, when people just have three amigos in a corner, but then don't communicate the results of that meeting. When people just involve three people instead of the people that are required for those meetings. Paying attention to what the actual communication model is important. And external role models in terms of what people expect are important. But essentially that's just a list of models. So what I've done is I've looked at some of the projects I've been involved in, and these are all from very early in my Agile learning process, to try and build some models of it, to try and demonstrate where tester fit in, where the test management skills fit in, how we crafted our role within there, because nothing is fixed. It's not true, it's subjective. So this was, and what I have to do is when I see this picture that some child, which was me, scribbled, I have to try and work out which job this was. That's my challenge. So this was my first Agile project. Previously to this, I'd done a lot of waterfall stuff. I tried to make that lean. I tried to cut back on the documentation to make things fast. I wanted to get into Agile because Agile was the thing. That was where the superheroes survived. That was the thing that I wanted to get into. I hadn't worked on an Agile project. So this was a company that wanted to get a tester in to help them with their Agile. And they were Agile. They were an Agile culture. They just needed a tester in. I thought, this is great, because I'm not a test manager, but I want to do Agile, so I could come in as a tester and I can help. Then I suddenly discovered that even though they are Agile, they had no idea what a tester was supposed to do in there. They just knew that there were defects coming through. You've got defects, we'll need testers, because testers defects. So that was why that was there. They didn't really know how the tester was going to fit in. They were Agile experts. They'd done Agile on other teams, but didn't know how tester fit in. Fortunate for them, I had no idea how a tester fit in Agile either, because this was my first Agile project, so I had to work it out. But fortunately, I wasn't just a tester, I'd been a test manager. I was used to looking at systems. I was used to figuring out what is the right test approach for this particular development approach. How do we communicate? What are the risks? Where are things going wrong? And those skills were what I used in order to adapt and survive in here. Because I started out doing all the things you're supposed to do. Right? You come in as a tester, you're co-located with the development team, they're doing pair programming, you will get involved in the pair programming. But my development skills weren't good enough at that point. It taught me I needed to be a better developer, so I learned how to be a better developer. But I couldn't do some of the things that were necessarily expected. So we had to change and adapt. So I looked at what skills and experience I had, what risks they were experiencing, and where I could add value. So I looked at who was already doing testing, because it wasn't completely falling apart. Users were doing testing, but how were they documenting their testing? Well, they weren't. How were they communicating it? Well, they weren't. So we can fix that, because I know how to do that. So I can help them do that. I can look at why is stuff coming out of this team up to the users, because we're not testing deep enough. The developers are doing testing, but they're not really looking at the traffic that's going through the system. I can do that. So I found tools that can help me investigate the traffic that's going through, and I could spot defects in there earlier than before it went to the users. We're crafting this in terms of what are the risks and issues, what are the actual gaps in our process that we have. And we had supportive management here, but we also had management outside this team. And some of those people didn't really care whether we were Agile or not, they just wanted stuff delivered. Some of these people wanted us to be more Agile, so they were looking for positive news coming out of this. I'm not necessarily a positive news guy. Right? This is what is happening. This is what is going on here. I'm a risks person. So I would speak to those people, not those people. But we had supportive management, and people wanted to make this work. And it was a good team, experienced developers, and we were all learning stuff, and we learned how to fix this. But I had to carve out this role. I had to make this role my own. And I was able to do that because I had experience of doing that from test management, from being a manager, from working with people, from knowing how to mentor people, knowing how to recruit things, knowing how to understand what a test strategy is, whether we even have one, where are risks and issues. It was those skills that helped me survive. If I was a tester without any of those management skills, I would not have survived in there because I would have done whatever I was told. All these management skills help us adapt. All the experience we have help us adapt. I've got a few case studies, so I'm trying to keep an eye on time. I also want to get questions, but we started late, so it might not happen. So, this is another one. So I was brought into this project as a test manager, but this is an Agile project, but they recognized they needed some sort of test manager, and part of the reason for that is we had test manager, dev lead, design lead, so we had a lead team inside the main team. We had primarily Agile programmers, but there were also programmers that had been there before that hadn't done a lot of Agile. Testers hadn't done any Agile, so they were working with the existing structured processes that were in place, trying to fit them into an Agile project, writing test cases and test scripts in advance in their spreadsheets the way they had always done it before, which wasn't quite working in the Agile project. But again, we just tried to figure out where the risks. Well, the risks are we're not actually doing enough testing because we're writing stuff down in advance, so let's do more testing. So I taught the testers how to do exploratory testing. I taught the developers how to do more exploratory testing. What happens if you don't do unit testing? Now, we were working with technology that wasn't easy to be agile in because it wasn't easy to write unit tests. It certainly wasn't easy to do TDD. So very often we get delivery of the software, you click a button, it would crash. It was that level of, and it would be random between releases. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes it worked, sometimes it wouldn't. We didn't have any automated execution, so I had to investigate what kind of automated execution have we got? What can we do that is lightweight given that we've got no money, given this technology is really not supported for anyone here? Again, that experience is what mapped on. But also, we've got outsourced stuff going on. We've got outsourced programmers, we've got outsourced testers. Who's managing that? And also, we've got normal, traditional communication, external management. Who is doing that communication? They still want to know how many defects you've got, what tests you're running, what coverage you've got. So your role kind of spans this and it adapts to whatever processes are currently in place. Because we had testers, no one was really managing the testers. So I managed the testers, because that's what test manager does. So you're looking after them as people, you're looking after their skill sets, you're making sure they know how to survive in this agile environment. You're backing them up, like you're protecting them from stuff. You're raising their concerns. All the stuff that you normally do as a test manager are still required in some projects, depending on the dynamics of that project. But it varies depending on what you're doing on. We still had UAT, so we had to focus on that. But essentially what I'm doing is focusing on the outcomes. What is actually happening? What are the actual risks and issues, and how do we deal with those? It's not an idealized model of this is how we test. It's what is actually happening? What can we do given the skill sets we've got? Do we need to get more people in? If we do, who's going to recruit those? Why goodness, that's going to be the test manager, because they have experience of recruiting testers in this environment. So we often hear that in the future, testers are either going to become automators or we're going to be like test coaches or agile coaches. We're not actually going to do any testing, we're just going to help and advise people. That was one of these roles, because we had a restructure. And so there's a bunch of people that the company didn't want to get rid of but didn't know what to do with. So we created our Agile Advisors team, which I was part of. So you've got lots of teams doing their thing, and they're doing their thing in different ways. So each one has a different process. Some of them have got testers, some of them don't have testers. Some of them are working with outsourced testers. The outsourced testers using a very structured process with a very political organisation that want to enforce their way of working on the teams. So I had to have political experience of protecting the teams from that, from working with outside politics, outside the team. Because remember, Agile is about the team. But we've got all this other stuff. And very often the test manager adds value in all this other stuff. But we still have to work with the teams because the team has testers and teams don't know how to manage testers and don't understand testers. So they need someone who can help them, who can recruit testers that work in that environment, who can make sure that the testers are doing the right things. Because some testers are not particularly good at communicating their exploratory testing. They're not particularly good at writing things down, particularly in an agile environment where they've been told they don't write things down. So helping them have the confidence to do whatever it takes in that environment to add value and survive is what that test management role was for, that other people were not doing or putting in place in those environments. because teams didn't know how to do automated execution, but it was really important because they were delivering things regularly, I had to do the investigation of that. I had to take people away so we could investigate certain tools to see what would work best. Because teams are focused on delivering that product. They're not always focused on how can we improve our processes, what tools can we get in, very often they don't have the time to do that. So sometimes external help can do that. And very often my role again was risk amplification. So because all the news that's coming out of teams is good news, but I was seeing it from a slightly different angle. And it was important that that got amplified, because otherwise they would get swamped later on by the over-optimism that they were generating in the outside world. Test managers are usually quite good at that. So here's another one. I think this is the second to last. Oops, wrong one. Right, so in this one. So here, this was a company that was moving to Agile, right? Because all companies are moving to Agile. So we've got teams. The teams have got programmers. Programmers are good. They're good at doing Agile. The project managers in there are now Scrum Masters, but really they're project managers. So they're doing all the project manager things. So when the team has bad news to communicate, they don't communicate it because they're project managers, not Scrum Masters. Scrum Masters will more than happily communicate bad news, which meant that this was very isolated. Now we also had front-end programmers, CMS programmers, back-end programmers, testers, and they were essentially all part of disciplines. They all had managers. So I was the test manager looking after the testers. The testers were put on test teams to work in an Agile environment. They weren't trained in Agile, so I had to help them train them in Agile, train them in exploratory testing, help them boost their automated skills, protect them from the stuff that was going wrong in those projects. Because when an Agile project isn't working particularly well and you have testers in it, it's very easy to blame the testers for finding bugs than it is to actually fix that process. And that happens a lot when it's an inexperienced Agile team, and it happens a lot when the project managers are not really Scrum Masters, they're project managers who are designed to protect it. And one of the things that I only realised when I was drawing this diagram is that we had the project management team. And the project management team had the head of the department, all the project managers, and me. It didn't have the head of front-end stuff, the head of the back-end development, the head of the CMS. So I was the only one from the development side that was taking an alternate view. So they were safe from all the politics. It was me versus the project managers, so I had to amplify that risk in terms of the project management. And now I understand, looking at this, some of the politics and the issues that we had. Systems view, taking a systems view and a model of it can really help understand the environment that you're working in. But I got thick skin, so that's okay. But also, as well as the Agile stuff, we had outsourced test projects that no one was looking at, that I had to help with to make sure we recruited the right people. And again, it's all of that just normal test management stuff, the politics, the recruitment, looking after the career of the testers, making sure testers are not getting blamed for stuff, making sure we're surviving in this environment. And the general spread into, let's help the programmers do better testing, let's help the programmers do TDD. And again, they can help me understand that. Because the more that you're interested in the technology they are working with, the happier they are to explain things. So that was a good environment for me because I learned JavaScript and I learned JavaScript testing that I didn't know before because that was the technology we were working with there. But also I taught the testers how to exploratory test at a deeper level on some HTTP traffic type systems that we hadn't worked with before. So we're constantly learning. But all of this is because I have a set of skills that are technical as well as management and political. Other managers have different sets of skills. Right? You might not be as technical, so you might have to work with people who are technical to help get that out. But the point is, you have to recognize the skill sets that you have and the experience that you have and how you can interface and integrate with this. Because it's going to be different from the way that I did. If you were on these projects, you would behave differently. You might have better relationships. You might not have done certain things. You might have worse relationships with some people. But it would vary. And that's because the system is made up of all the people that are in it. It is changeable. Because it's not an ideal. So what is here that I missed? Don't think there's anything really there. But there's a lot of politics in that, and that meant I had to defend the testers, which hopefully a test manager is good at. Because test managers, I think, are not World War I managers. Right? We don't just throw people over the wall and let them get shot. Right? It's much more later on. We try and look after them, make sure they're not being sent into battle without the right equipment. We don't want to go back to that World War I, throw them over the wall. So this was kind of manager coaching model we had all the leaders on one side, we had teams, they're very agile, everyone was really experienced. This is probably the most experienced set of agile people I had worked with at the time. We're moving to DevOps, we were experimenting by merging the team and the operations staff in there, so we still had operations, but the team were getting more responsible for this. But even here, there were still risks that had to be amplified. There were still outsourcing that had to be managed. There were outsourcing projects that we didn't give to the teams because they need to be done quicker, but we still needed to be tested, otherwise the risk was on board. But people didn't see that risk until it was stressed to them. So it was still very much the career and skill mentoring of testers, recruiting testers, making sure they're surviving. But even there, when you look at the system, you see that there's a lot of pairing going on with the developers, but not a lot of pairing between the developers and the testers. Not a lot of pairing on the testing. So trying to change that to help make them as agile as they can be was one of the things that we tried to do. And you have to do that sometimes by leading by example, which means sitting down with the developers and pairing with them to test. So I find with Agile, a lot of it is leading by example, not leading by telling. It's leading by doing and getting in there and working with them. Which means you might have to go back a couple of years in your skill set to boost those skills to come back in order to survive. So the common elements in all of this, if people don't know what a test manager is for, but we have testers, the question is, well, who's helping those testers? How are testers going to survive in that environment if there's no one looking out for them, if there's no one actually taking that point of view for them, protecting them from the politics of stuff that's going on? Who is stressing things on their behalf that other people are overly optimistic for? Right? Most people expect the project to work. They're optimists. Testers help people understand that things might go wrong, that there are risks, that we should pay attention to those. What is important to understand is that regardless of whether people understand Agile or not, the core of testing is fundamentally unchanged when we move into Agile. Right? We still test because we want information about the repeatable functionality, whether things are continuing to work under this particular set of data, under these particular conditions, whether there are risks, whether we can mitigate them. That core set of testing stuff that we've grown up with is still required on Agile projects. We might put rituals in place to try and mitigate it, but they don't always work because they're not always implemented effectively. And they might not implement testing as well as they could do. So we are there to help. So if it gets to the point where you're concerned, can I survive in Agile? Can I not? It becomes a notion of, what I want you to take on board is that you are a system, right? You are a system, a skill sets, experiences, there's things that you can do. It's not as though you're interfacing with a process, you're interfacing with other systems. The team is a system. The team is a system made up of individuals who are systems. If we think of things as processes, development process, agile process, scrum process, we are external to that. We are not. We are systems and we interface. And then we look at the communication links, and then we look at the relationships, and pretty much everything is a relationship point. And we need to look to see whether that is working or not. So what I want you to do is work with the actual systems. Right? Because it's very easy to work with ideals and get hung up on them and say, this is not Agile. We are not working effectively on Agile. We are doing Agile wrong. It doesn't matter. As a consultant, your job is not to tell people they're doing Agile wrong. Your job is to help them improve whatever it is they're doing to meet the outcomes that they actually want to achieve. That's the experience that we bring in. And also people get hung up on their role. So they get hung up on test manager as a role. Well, what we have to bear in mind is that a role is an attempt to clarify what people expect from you. When you're writing a job spec, you're writing a job spec for a role, so you have to write down the things that you expect the person to do, what you expect them to be responsible for. But fundamentally, that's a starting point it's an entry point. It's your basic interface before you start negotiating individual relationships with the teams, because that's what you are. You are that set of skills and experience, and you can still bring that to bear on Agile projects. And each one of you will do it individually and differently, because that's how we work, and we figure out how we can add value in that environment, and that's where it works. So we have to own the particular situation that we're dealing with and figure out how we can best communicate in there. Thank you very much. So, have we still got time for questions? When are we supposed to finish? Is it 5 to 2?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. 3 minutes. So does anyone got any questions?
Yeah, I've got questions. So you talked about upskilling skilling the teams and things like exploratory testing and automation. But if the test, when they're new to Agile, things like self-empowerment, being independent, being proactive, that can be quite strange for testers new to Agile. So how did you deal with that, the soft side of things?
So soft side, how do we deal with the soft side when people are used to technical stuff but not necessarily raising their voice and knowing when to stand up, particularly when you're in a new environment, because they're in a new environment, they don't know what to establish. So a lot of that is normal management stuff where you have one-to-ones, you understand what their concerns are. But what I also did was I had to work with the teams. So I would go to the team stand-ups, I would go to the team's retrospectives, I would try and observe the teams in action to get a better feel for that person's point of view, what could they do with those people, and you're just trying to coach people through. But also what I'm doing is trying to exemplify some ways of working within that team so they have an example. Because very often they're outnumbered on teams, and they see how developers work. They don't see how testers work in that team, because they're the only tester. So you have to give them another example of how that might work. And you have to take flack from them. So you tell them, I'm going to do this, so that you don't have to. Which then gives them more confidence that they don't have to be this voice of raising risks all the time. So it's more that one-to-one type relationship. Any other questions? Okay, so we have stickers. If you want stickers, I will be here for 2 days. I have badges. I am modelling one of the badges now, if you like one of these badges. And remember, we have leaflets on how to survive in Agile. So thank you very much once again.